No partnership is perfect, but having someone to go along on that road with has been wonderful. We had some massive hurricanes came through. Our first office was essentially destroyed.
Oh, wow.
We had barely just started taking a paycheck, and then we ended up sort of having to put more money into our business and relocate. I don't know, like as a 50-something-year-old, to think about doing it again, it was a long, hard road.
This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is someone I'm excited to have on the show. She's an optometrist, business owner, contact lens specialist, and nationally recognized speaker, researcher, and consultant. She co-founded and led a private optometry practice focused on specialty contact lens and eye disease. She's a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, and she's served in many leadership roles within the organization. She leads optometric services for Grace Medical Home, which is a nonprofit organization providing healthcare services to the working poor in her local community. She's owner and optometrist at Eola Eyes in Orlando. Please welcome Dr. Kerry Giedd. Kerry, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a privilege and an honor. I have admired you from afar for a long time and the work that you've done on behalf of optometry and seen you at meetings, especially iDoc. And it's so cool to be on the podcast with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, flattery will get you everywhere, right? Is that what they say? Well, thank you. I appreciate those kind words. Well, so with that, you've got a really impressive background and you've developed a really impressive community. Tell us a little bit about what was the most important thing that helped you grow your empire?
Yeah. Well, interesting question, right? I know there's a little tongue in cheek with the empire term in your podcast, and many of us who own an independent practice probably didn't think of it setting out that way. But when I look back and reflect, when I graduated from optometry school at Ohio State in 2000, I moved to Florida with my husband, who's also an OD. And his career was kind of going a little bit different direction, and met who's now been my business partner for 23 years, a fellow female doc that we just met in the community and optometric conferences and meetings and so forth, and kind of befriended each other. And we're both really proud of ourselves for landing these really great jobs and these really high profile, successful sort of legacy practices in our community. And so we worked in these practices for about a year and then kind of realized that maybe there was some smoke and mirrors there and it wasn't all we thought it was going to be. And what we thought was our dream job was kind of, sort of crashing down around us. And we thought, well, what do you do from here? Like, these were supposed to be the great practices to work for. And behind the scenes, there was just a lot of, practice culture, politics, unkept promises with exit strategies and opportunities to be an owner. And we got to talking and we said, well, we're just going to do it ourselves. And so we started a practice together. We co-founded our practice named after a landmark lake in the center of Orlando, Lake Eola. So our practice is Eola Eyes. We started with the end in mind. I think one thing we really did well, and that I think has led us through a lot of things over the last 23 years to really achieve what has been just such an incredible ride, a wonderful road. I feel like optometry has blessed me in more ways than I could ever count. But in specifically what I think we did in doing that was so helpful was, for us, the partnership, which I know is not always the path of success for people, but for us, partnership really represented the opportunity to share a practice, to divide and conquer, share the responsibility, the risk, and then have time for a family and other things. And I think doing that intentionally so early in our careers has just played out in ways that have just been really wonderful. And like a marriage, no partnership is perfect, but having someone to go along on that road with has been wonderful. We now have a third partner and an associate, and there's 4 of us. And we can dive into that to the extent that you want. But I think designing that practice that we could share and grow together, and still leave time for the other things and the balance between practice and personal endeavors has been wonderful.
Let's dig into that a little bit. I'm curious, what does it mean by design? Because it could mean a lot of different things, right? Did you start with financials? Did you design with patient care? We alluded to a little bit in the intro with the contact lens and disease, but tell us a little bit about the design process.
Yeah. I think specifically from the get-go designed what would have been a one full-time equivalent practice that we shared the hours and the coverage. And in the very early days, we each worked in separate practices to kind of get our practice off the ground and still make a paycheck and be able to pay rent and buy groceries and all. So, in the beginning, we were working full-time hours, but as our practice grew, and of course there were some bumps in the road as there often are, and we had some hurricanes in Orlando and some other setbacks, but along the way, our practice grew and we, could scale things where we were sharing, we both built patient bases through our own networks of people and so forth. So the design I really mean is that by sharing the risks and responsibilities of practice ownership, just allowed, for that balance that so many of us, try to achieve. And sometimes it plays out better on paper than in reality, but overall, the design of sharing, the practice from the start has really worked well for us, and has played out over 23 years to be, so much more beneficial than any, you know, drawback.
Gotcha. And it's interesting. That's I think it's amazing being able to sit back after having some success, be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we did. It was easy. Tell me
Yeah.
about a time it wasn't so easy. Like, what did you run into that you didn't expect?
Yeah, and that is a great point. I mean, I think the reflection, the rearview mirror is definitely different, and I think there were some major hurdles in 2004, which was a year and a half after we had opened. We had some massive hurricanes came through. Our first office was essentially destroyed.
Oh wow.
We had barely just started taking a paycheck, and then we ended up sort of having to put more money into our business and relocate. So we had some pretty, major setbacks early on. 2008, the economy was pretty rough back then, and we continued to grow through that, but I think it took some sacrifice. I think it was definitely trying to keep our eye on the prize that the long game of practice ownership was going to be worth it, because for us it really was a pretty slow start because of some setbacks, and there were points where we went a really long time without a paycheck, and especially when new grads today might be graduating with a lot more debt than we had, by proportion. I know that's a really hard sacrifice to make. We did both have student loans and significant ones for the time, but still manageable in a way. So, I think powering through some of those hurdles and being able to kind of scale back your personal life in the short term in terms of the materialistic things that you think you need and want, to kind of let that long game play out, was great. I also pursued other things in consulting and clinical research and stuff like that that had different revenue streams.
Well, that's interesting. So, you got how many partners do you have now?
2, I have the partner who I founded the practice with, and then another one that joined us, a few years later. Interestingly, she had taken over my original partner's position in the practice she left, and, uh, realized early on that that was also what she thought was her dream job wasn't, and approached us and said, "Hey, can I join you guys?" And, so anyway, it wasn't really us looking for a partner, but, it just sort of evolved that way. So, we
Okay.
we ended up relocating and growing further, in terms of the scale and size and scope, and of course, as cold starts do, but, um, anyway, so now we're up to 4 docs.
So tactically, how does that look from a part? And you don't have to share that you don't want to, obviously, anything that's confidential. But like, how do you work that financially, the working hours, compensation? Why did you decide to bring? You kind of hinted at the partner side, but would you do it again? Right? Like, kind of talk me through some of the details and the nitty gritty and the like how you made it work.
Yeah. I think we're very symmetric in our schedules and our kind of desires and ability and capacity from the get-go. So it worked out very organically for us that there wasn't, this partnership that had this great disparity in anything, in productivity and hours of work, and just it all just sort of meshed that way, which I realized I don't know that that was super intentional. I think there was some planning in that, but I think we were the same age, the same stage of life. There was just a lot of parity in what our situations. So we didn't have to, and even to this day, haven't had to really navigate a lot of, oh, I want to work twice as much as you, and what does that look like in compensation? We've kind of talked through how that plays out. Obviously the compensation that goes from production versus distributions and how we figure all that out. I think intrinsically there's still the math would still work out that if we decided to do a shift even now, we could do that. But from the beginning, it was a pretty equally shared, um, workload. And we kind of fell into like, oh, she would do payroll and I would, do the accounts payable and accounts receivable, or, you name the task. We kind of divided and conquered, and largely we still do that. Obviously, we delegate a whole lot more. We resource things in ways we didn't even think were going to exist, 20 years ago. But that's still the case.
So I think you hit something really interesting, like the division of labor. I think I hear so many times, a lot of partners, they get jealous or upset because they feel like they're doing too much work. How did you all
Yeah.
prevent that? What
Yeah.
was yeah, did it come up even? Were you just so like amazing that it never happened?
Yeah, that is a fair question. I'm sure that that does happen, whether it's personalities or even just life events, somebody's family has certain needs or just, whatever, and the design can fall apart pretty quickly. I think we've gone through seasons. We've been through a lot together in 23 years as far as, having kids and families and moves, and now we're in the stage of the sandwich generation of aging parents and kids going off to college. And so through those seasons, I think we've, kind of found the balance and navigated that to a point where we've never really reached a point where we think, gosh, I really, you know, I'm doing too much or she's doing too much. But I think that's, again, kind of like a marriage. You show up for each other. You realize that, this is a season and it's not going to last forever. And so I think we haven't really talked about it so directly, but I would say from my perspective, the net of that has been pretty even. So, not that there weren't challenges, but I think it just the division of labor. We talk about who's going to do what. There's stuff to do, or are we going to delegate it? Now with three partners, it's easy to have a vote. There's always, even if it's, there's no direct split. So there are definitely times where I think we all have faith in each other that, hey, this is not a hill I'm going to die on. If the two of you think this, I'll agree. If there's something that somebody's so passionate about and they are gonna die on that hill, we're open to that too. So we all have pretty different personalities and a lot of different dynamics in our personal lives. But again, I think you realize, especially as you get older, like life isn't perfect. Perfect is the enemy of good. How can we make this work? And is the alternative better? And I think in every season, in every situation, the alternative has never seemed better to me to do it alone or do it a different way.
Sounds like you all have some level of understanding or communication or automatically natural personality fits that seem to
Yeah.
mesh well, or combination of yeah.
Yeah, I think, not to be sexist in a statement, but I think, women, as you kind of learn to balance motherhood and dynamics and, again, what hills you're going to die on. And, you just, with age and maturity, you just kind of, I think, work through those things. And not that everybody does, but
Yeah.
thank goodness it's been a good balance. And I've probably been the partner that's the most active, in the profession outside of the practice, and doing things, whether it be for the academy or consulting or whatever. And so if we all had those same desires, that probably would be tough. But my partners really, they really love to be engaged in the practice, and that's not really their strength or their passion. And
Mhm.
they have other great strengths. So they cover me when I, do things. I, include them in research, and we've all been able to have separate revenue streams from clinical research, which is a thing that I kind of pursued, but, has benefited the partners as a whole. So, yeah. So now, I mean, now we're to the point starting to think about exit strategy, not too seriously, but thinking that way. But it's like, wow, 23 years, no one's divorced. Nobody's, we're still here.
Yeah. That's good. That's amazing. And so, if you were to give some, and based off of your experience, if someone was considering a path to ownership, but they have loans or they want to try to do it with someone else, they don't know, how would you suggest approaching the partnership angle? Like, find a friend, find someone else. Like, how would you, based off your experience, how would you do it?
Yeah, I think, dialing into the profession, which, when we did it, there was, very little internet and, just the ways of connecting with people were different and we, or, found each other through the local community. But, whether it be, if you're interested in private independent practice, engaging in a group, whether that be an eye doc type thing, which I know you and I have crossed paths at, and, or otherwise. There's lots of ways to find your path and lots of people who are looking for an associate if you're looking to be a practice owner but don't really want to do it from the start. Um, I love a lot of your guests that you've had on here, and one other fellow friend of ours, an IDOT guy that we both know, Larry Golson, who's
Yeah.
just a great human and great to listen to and learn from. I think of him because he's built not only a great practice, but really a business and a consulting. But when you hear him talk, he's so humble. He'll tell you, like, it's not like he got it right the first time, and
Yeah.
none of us got it all right the first time. You figured it out. You hired some duds. You kept them too long in the beginning, and then you realize you need to fire faster. So there's a lot of bumps in the road. Um, and I think even Larry recently said on one of your shows, like, I don't know that I'd do it again. And I don't know, like, as a 50-something-year-old, I the to think about doing it again, it was a long, hard road, and especially the income deprivation and, just all the things you have to do, and, but at this stage, if you can power through that, if you wanna find your person, I think you've gotta be committed to that, and if you wanna have a partnership or you wanna be in a practice, the opportunities are there, and, I think in our community, which is representative of a lot of communities and practice, um, geographics and so forth in the country, so much has gone to private equity, and different practice models that none of us saw on the radar 20 years ago. And that has really almost reinvigorated us or renewed our passion for private independent practice, and patients are finding us seeking that out. I mean, we had a patient come in and say, I asked ChatGPT to find me an independent optical, and they led me to you, or it led me to you. That I couldn't have in my wildest dreams predicted years ago. So I think there's still such an opportunity for that. And as retiring, ODs, I'm hoping that I understand why private equity is appealing, and there's lots of dynamics there, but I hope that we'll all be able to, for those of us who want to be able to sorta, coach, mentor, that younger generation of people who want to become practice owners, um, because, we're busier than ever, the demand is greater than ever, and I don't think we really have a magical recipe. I think we take care of people the way we would wanna be treated, and when people come in, they're like family. When we do have new hires, come aboard, it's usually the first thing they will comment, like, "Gosh, everybody, like," sometimes, your exams, if they take long, it's because you guys just everybody loves you, and I know that's not always a scalable thing, and it's not always desirable to have that practice built too much around any one personality, and I don't necessarily think that's our case, but we just all, want people to come in and feel like they've had, the best experience they coulda had.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, that's an interesting take because, it's almost like a pendulum. Everyone is like, "I wanna get out of this business, it's terrible."
Yeah,
Now it's like, "Okay, it's not so bad," now that the private equity is buying up all the other places, there's more unique environments with private practice. So it's
yeah,
the pendulum's kinda swinging the other way.
yeah. And I think for me and many of my colleagues that I know that their burnout is a real thing, right? And in our profession and in many healthcare professions and many professions in general, and seeing patients full time 5 days, 6 days a week, as some people do, I think is really a recipe for that. We all know we make the most money. We're all driving revenue. We're in the exam room, and there's a lot of other stuff you can delegate outside of that, but it's exhausting. to talk to patients all day and solve their problems all day and chart. And, obviously there's things you can delegate even within that, of course. But I really think that, for as many people that are coming into this profession seeking, the balance that optometry is said to provide, designing a practice that allows you to see patients, whatever, 2 to 3 days a week. I've been 2.5 days a week for 20 years, um, seeing patients. And of course I work a lot more hours than that, but I can do that on my own time. I can pick up my kids. I can go on field trips. I can take them to college, and somebody's always there to have my back at the practice.
Yeah, that's nice. And as I do want to touch on you're doing stuff with speaking. You're doing things with American AOA. You're doing things with local community. That's a lot, right? And so, tell us about how was that more just for you personally, or was that for the business, or a little bit of both?
I think for me, I went to Ohio State, and I don't know how other schools necessarily compare. I only know what I know, but I did my master's while I was there, and got really brought into a family of research-based optometrists there at Ohio State, and the people that have been deans since and so forth. And that community really built just a passion for me for the Academy of Optometry, and doing things like incorporating clinical research into my practice. And that all that stuff's kind of peripheral to my main life. I'm not doing the research all the time or whatnot. But I just really, from my infancy in my career, I really just developed a passion for being involved in other things. I think it's just true to my family and who my husband and I are as people in terms of giving back. We came from families that were very we didn't go on vacations. A special trip was like, going to a hotel an hour away with a pool, like we
Yeah.
just didn't have any extras. We were well cared for. We had what we needed. We had parents who loved us, but we had no extras. And optometry has blessed us so much that, like, the least I can do is, help people out that have, been on a different path. There's people that work way harder for me than me for way less. And I just truly, it's my faith. It's just a lot of things, but giving back personally, professionally is important to me. So finding time for that, it's true. Like it's that work-life balance thing on paper sometimes looks better than it is. And there's peaks and valleys in that, but you make time for what's important, and you figure it out. My kids are grown and flown largely, so now I've got, more of that. Those things have grown into my free time as well.
Yeah, I like that. And so, what well, how are you all dealing with like staffing challenges, with insurance reimbursements? Those are some common
Oh,
challenges across the board.
oh,
Like, how are you dealing with that?
yeah. We went through COVID, and we were really fortunate. Like, I feel like we had this great team. We really bonded through COVID. We didn't fire anybody or furlough anybody. Nobody missed a paycheck. And it just was a terrible time that we weathered that storm pretty well as a business. And then, as the Great Recession came, and just, life happens. Working as a tech and optometry practice is a bit of a dead end job. There's not a lot of room for growth and opportunity. So people, pass through and move on. So anyway, as the years have followed since COVID, I think we were a little bit of a delayed realization of these challenges that people had been facing a little bit sooner than us. But it's hit. We've been trying to fill a position or two on and off for a year or two, and the applicant pool is different. The just the capacity to manage things and multitask within the office, it does seem like it's a different workflow. So we've had to adjust accordingly. We have done some, resourcing outside the office, and I'll give you a plug on that, Ankit. We've used my business care team and have a great virtual assistant who, helps us with a lot of different things, administratively, that don't need to happen in our practice. And that covers things from filing, insurance and vision plan claims, or applying EOBs, managing appointment requests online, a lot of patient communications through email or text. And we can just delegate whatever. I can send her a task through my EHR, and say, "Hey, just can you do this for me?" And she'll do whatever. And that's been a great thing. We're still building her skills. I do think, as I don't need to tell you, but for people that have been on that path with virtual assistants and are considering it, I think you have to realize like you have to put the work in. They don't come in knowing how your practice operates, and they have a foundational knowledge a lot of times, and ours did. And she's great with the English language, even though it's not her first language, and that's all wonderful. But it there you have to pour into them a lot, and she's not in our office to see our culture daily, and so there's some work on that. But for the affordability as well as the way you can preserve the culture and the capacity of your on-site team, preserving their mental, you know, health or whatever you want to call it as best you can, where they're, running themselves spread thin, outsourcing some things that way has been a great opportunity.
Yeah.
So, in terms of, yeah, the reimbursements, we've cut vision plans. We only take VSP at this point, we've never taken too many of the lower level ones. We don't take IMED. We use Anagram, and I think
Mm.
that Anagram has, for us, it's been a great thing. We've been on that a long time. It's for just for recap for those who don't know that, but that allows you to pretty seamlessly file out of network benefits. You can use the term open access provider with patients, and so for that patient who calls and says, "Oh, do you take Davis?" Oh, good news, Mrs. Smith. You can still use your benefits with us. We're an open access provider. You'll come to us. You will pay us as a private pay patient, but we're going to do all the legwork. You're going to get some reimbursement from Davis in the mail, and we'll do that for you. So, things like that. You know, for us, I think that's been a great avenue, and other people have different beliefs on that, but I think that's what, makes small business, is we find our way. And I know even Nathan Hayes, our friend from IDOC and otherwise, has, he'll sometimes comment even in a room full of people that he doesn't agree with some of the unconventional things that maybe we've done and designing our practice, but he usually does give us credit that it's worked out really well for us. So, you gotta find your way. I know, like many of us, and you included, we love business books, we love business podcasts, we love, learning and, outside of optometry. And one book that came way too late in my career, probably 5 to 10 years after I opened an optometry practice, that I always still reference to people nowadays when they're opening a business, is the E-Myth. And just that concept of like, you could be the best doctor. I don't care if you graduated first in your class, you did all the things, you were valedictorian of everything. That does not mean that you are going to run a successful optometry practice, or that you're going to like to run an optometry practice. And so that, the pie store analogy is the one in the book, but I think that just really resonates. And when you think about what you want your day to look like, what do you enjoy doing? Do you hate doing the books? Okay, you can still be a really successful private practice owner, because you can certainly outsource that to another individual you delegate, to someone like Nathan and his team at Books and Benchmarks. You name it. You don't have to do that, but if you really don't like managing people, you don't want to, deal with the operations, that's probably not for you, right?
Yeah.
And so I think really discerning that, I think I loved that book just because it just articulated so concisely and directly, that difference. And when you're discerning, like, do you really is business ownership, even if you love to make pies or love to do optometry, that doesn't mean you're gonna love owning
Yeah.
a practice.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I like that book too. It's a good book. So especially if you know someone who doesn't know anything about business, it's a great place to start.
Yeah.
Um, so what are you excited about looking in the future? We kind of touched on it with your private ownership, but either you personally or the industry, or, I'll let you kind of take that question wherever you want. But yeah, what are you most excited about?
Yeah. Good question. I am excited that optometry is, I really truly believe, alive and well, in the future forecast, even with AI and even with ways that'll hopefully make our jobs easier. I think that's my greatest hope. I think that one thing that I've continued to struggle with is, and many have mastered this so much better than me. So I have many people to learn from, in the profession, but just charting the way that I want and getting that done, whether you're delegating that to a scribe, delegating that to some version of AI that really hasn't been perfected yet. Um, that's the part I hate, the most about my day, and sometimes the thing that slows me down. And so I look forward to things like that where I can really engage eye to eye, one-on-one with my patients even more and not have some of that stuff. So I'm excited in just a basic practice functionality level for things like that. Um, I'm excited for the next chapter of my life to get to hopefully we'll bring in perhaps a young associate or two, or, look to that next chapter to, continue to practice. I love that optometry allows you to practice indefinitely, perhaps, as long as you want, years and years down the road, but still have the shared, continuing to share that with others. Um, I'm trying to think because I don't know that I've been as forward focused as to say what I'm excited about, but I've continued to enjoy the ride.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I think, it's nice to hear an optimistic tone.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not always, there's always some, but and I don't wanna be, I don't wanna mislead people, right? Like, there's stuff every day that's going down, and there's always a fire to put out. Surrounding yourself with great people, yeah, which is easier said than done, of course, because like we talked about, the applicant pool and the job market is harder than ever, but, I've got an awesome office manager, awesome staff, and we've been really fortunate despite, the trends, finding those needles in the haystack, and taking care of your people. They have
Mm.
building a culture that they wanna come and they wanna stay. That's when people struggle with that turnover, right? Like, there's definitely some self-reflection in that should come, of course. Well, how can you make it a place where you're not hiring all the time, you know? If you're actively hiring because you always wanna look for those gems that might be hiding, but that's one thing. But if you're always hiring because you're always short-staffed, um, that may be more of a you problem than a applicant problem. Um, I think in terms of doing business with your patients, and another thing I'm just really passionate about is, patients want, right? Don't they want it to be easy to do business with you?
Nope.
Like, does anybody wanna have to call you and wait for the phone to ring and hope somebody get answers and put on hold and be transferred? No. I don't even wanna make a nail appointment by calling a human being. Like, I don't wanna call my doctor, but I wanna go. And so I think there's, um, a lot to be said for that, and our success as a practice, and things that patients really love about us outside of the personal component. Not to be sounding like I'm tooting my own horn or whatever, but the if someone's out there not really engaging, with two-way texting and online scheduling and, a somewhat up-to-date website that allows, you to do business and sell contacts and, pay bills either through text or online. Just some of those basic things that I don't think any of that's particularly, not, but that's all should be kind of the bare minimum at this point. But I still feel like there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of practices out there to be attractive to patients in that way, and be easy to do business with, and say no with a yes. "Yes, Mrs. Smith, I know you'd love to see Dr. Geed on Wednesday. How does Thursday work? I never see patients on Wednesday. You're never gonna see me on Wednesday. It doesn't matter if you're gonna wait 6 months. I'm not gonna be there on a Wednesday to see you." Obviously, we don't tell our patients that, but, how do you phrase that to the patient? And building your culture around that where the people are happy to come see you, and you're kinda getting ahead of the problems. I mean, it makes for a culture that people wanna be a part of.
I love that. There's a lot of gold in what you just said, I think. So with the culture, with the, say yes for the no, yeah, that's really, really insightful. I think, we could probably talk a couple more hours just on that. But and maybe I'll have to have you back on at some point to dive deeper into that culture piece. Wha so I'm gonna shift a little bit. Can you share with us a story that was formative for you? Something that made you who you are today?
I'm kinda winging it here, thinking about what just, charted my course, changed the trajectory, that kinda thing. My first job in optometry, was when I was in undergrad, and I worked for Tom Quinn, who's kind of a legend in our profession in Athens, Ohio. I went to school there. And, working with Tom and his wife, Susan, and their team there was so it was just a place that I admired so much. I had been pre-med and thinking I was gonna go to med school and kinda discerning where my path was, and, um, and I got into their practice, and at this point, I had kinda thought about optometry. It wasn't like it was not on my radar, but I had worked with a lot of MDs who were NDOs who were just, um, not really recommending that as a career path, and I think of that experience, and Tom's been a mentor to me. We actually do a mentorship module for the academy every year together, he's not somebody I call every month to even talk to or get advice from, but having someone early in your career, and if you don't have a mentor and you don't have someone you can ask, seeking that out, I think is really important. Someone who's not just in your backyard necessarily, or even in optometry necessarily. Um, I think of how he shaped my view of what the potential for private practice and incorporating clinical research into your practice and still loving your family so well and showing up for your kids. He just modeled that for me early in my career in ways that I saw, very directly and intimately when I worked for him. So um, I don't know if that's a one event or one set of, you know, token words, but that always I always remember my time in their office, and so there's that. Um, when I had my first job for this practice that I thought I scored this amazing job and I was gonna own this practice, and it was, making all this money and all this stuff, and without saying anything too, harsh to the doctor that owned it, I just kinda realized, clinically how much lacking there was, and there was just so much missing from the depth of knowledge. I think it's one thing when you can be, um, loved by your patients, and her patients really did love her, but also you need to balance that with the clinical acumen and the knowledge to
Yeah.
back it up and treat disease the right way, or know your limits and refer it when you don't, billing ethically, things like that, I saw modeled for me in that job some things that were, just not what I wanted to be. On
Yeah.
the surface, it looked like a great job, and there was just, a lot of things behind the scenes that were not doing business the right way. So, that those kind of things really shaped me and then led me to say like, "Hey, like, I'm just gonna do this myself," and got a found somebody to do it with me, and we decided that over sushi one night. We were, we had a tech who worked with both of us in different situations and was going off to optometry school, and we were taking her out to sushi. That sushi restaurant is still, down the street from my house, and to this day, and we got to talking about how much it sucked in these places we were in, um, and we decided right then and there, "Hey, let's just do this together. Let's figure this out."
I like that. I like that. So knowing what you know now, what would you give to yourself as advice 1 week after graduating OD school from Ohio State?
Well, so a week after I graduated OD school, I'll give you a little bit quick sidebar is, I got married to someone who also graduated from Ohio State that same day I did. So, and we the next week picked up and moved to Florida. I had, been born and raised in Cleveland. Didn't necessarily have a distinct plan to stay there, but, didn't necessarily have a plan to not stay there, and met who, was then my husband, who had lived in Florida for a while, and I thought, "Gosh, Orlando sounds a little nicer than Cleveland. Let's try that." So, we packed up our bags. I had no job, very unsure of what I was gonna do. And so when I look back at those days, I was young, I was excited, I, was in love, I was, all the things, but I really didn't at all know what was gonna happen. I didn't know, seeing what Tom had modeled for me in his practice, his wonderful, successful practice with his family and everything looking all so desirable. The gap between what I saw there and me just picking up and leaving 1,000 miles and not knowing where I was gonna go, I really didn't know how I was gonna get from A to B. I didn't even know how I was gonna get a Florida license because that was known to be really, really tough. And I would say, you know what? You know, you've got the grit, you've got you've got the desire and it's going to all work out. Don't live beyond your means, pay your debt, you know, start slow, and the long game is great. And optometry is a unique profession and how we can change lives very directly, oftentimes very quickly. The opportunity to own a business and have the retail and the fashion component and the medical, for me was really exciting then, and it's still really exciting now. I yeah, I would just say, you know what, follow your heart, follow your passion, don't compromise your integrity. Um, if you take a job you don't like, just like my own employees that now I would say I should hire slow, fire fast. I should leave fast if it's not right.
Okay. I like that. I like that. So, Kerry, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
They can connect with me. You can put my Gmail, Kerry Giedd at Gmail, on the show notes if you want. They can find me through my practice. Uh, I don't mind if you have my cell number. I'm not always the fastest texter to reply, if it's not urgent, but yeah, I go on LinkedIn, not every day. Those notifications stack up.
Yeah.
But I am on social media if you want to find me in any of those channels, or Kerry Giedd at Gmail.
Kerry Giedd at Gmail. Okay, gotcha. We will put that in the show notes if you're okay with that. So,
Yeah,
uh, excellent. So, well, thank you again, Kerry, for being a guest on the show.
thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's been great getting to know you over those last few years and seeing you at iDoc, and appreciate again, the connections and resources you've brought to our practice and to many others through my business care team, and love what that's done for us. So thanks for everything.
No, thank you for those kind words. And one of my takeaways from this is, it's almost like there are business models that work, even though it may not be conventional wisdom, right? You
Yeah,
almost did everything exactly opposite of what people say is conventional wisdom, and had a very successful career and lifestyle because of it. It's amazing to see that.
yeah,
And so I think there are ways, finding the right partners, finding the
yeah.
right channels, finding the right mentors to help guide that are really critical. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience. If you learned anything or laughed, or please share the podcast with a friend. And if you hit the subscribe button, you won't miss an episode. And there's a meeting link in the show notes. And if you book that, I'll send you a free copy of my book, Optometry Redefined. Thank you again, Dr. Giedd. And this has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.